I was paralyzed with fear. I was watering my tomato plants in the backyard when I heard the doorbell ring 3 times in quick succession. Nobody rings a doorbell like that unless they want something badly. My name is Walter, and I'm 67 years old. I spent 32 years working as a high school art teacher in Columbus, Ohio before retiring 8 years ago. What I'm about to share with you changed everything I thought I knew about family, love, and the true meaning of sacrifice. Let me take you back to where this all began. It was a cold February morning in 2016 when my son Derek showed up at my doorstep. He was 31 at the time, and he wasn't alone. In his arms was a small girl with tangled brown hair and the biggest hazel eyes I'd ever seen. She couldn't have been more than 5 years old. "Dad, I need you to watch Emma for a few days," Derek said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Just until I figure some things out." I noticed the single backpack slung over his shoulder. Just one backpack for a child who was supposedly staying a few days. "What's going on, son?" I asked, stepping aside to let them in. "It's complicated." He set Emma down on my couch like she was a piece of furniture. The girl didn't make a sound, didn't cry, didn't reach for her father. She just sat there, staring at the wall with those enormous eyes. Derek talked to me. He ran his fingers through his hair, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "She's deaf, Dad. Completely deaf. Born that way. Her mother left us 6 months ago, said she couldn't handle it anymore. And He paused, swallowing hard. "I can't do this alone. I got a job offer in Seattle, good money. But I can't take her with me. Not like this." I felt my heart drop into my stomach. "What do you mean, not like the US?" "She needs special schools, speech therapy, sign language classes. I don't know any of that stuff. I can barely communicate with her. She throws tantrums because she can't tell me what she wants. I'm losing my mind, Dad." I looked at Emma. She was watching our lips move, her brow furrowed in concentration. She couldn't hear a word we were saying, but she knew we were talking about her. "So you're just going to leave her here?" "It's temporary," Derek insisted. "I'll get settled in Seattle, make some money, find the right resources, and then I'll come back for her. A year, maybe 2. I knew a lie when I heard one. I'd heard plenty from Derek over the years. Broken promises about coming home for Christmas, missed phone calls, forgotten birthdays. My son had always been good at running away from hard things. "Derek, she's your daughter, and I'm doing what's best for her." His voice hardened. "You were a teacher, Dad. You know how to handle kids." "I don't." Before I could respond, he knelt down in front of Emma. He made a few clumsy hand gestures that I later learned were supposed to mean, "I love you and be good." Emma didn't react. She just kept staring at the wall. Derek stood up, handed me the backpack, and walked out the door. I watched his car disappear down the street, and I knew in my gut that I wouldn't see him again for a very long time. I turned back to Emma. She was still sitting on the couch, perfectly still. No tears, no questions. This poor child had been abandoned so many times that she'd learned not to expect anything from anyone. I sat down next to her, keeping a respectful distance. I didn't know any sign language. I didn't know anything about deaf children. But I knew one thing for certain. This little girl needed someone to fight for her, and if her own father wouldn't do it, then I would. The first few months were the hardest of my life. Emma had severe communication delays because nobody had bothered to teach her sign language properly. She could only use about 20 signs, mostly for basic needs like food, water, and bathroom. Everything else came out as frustration, tantrums, and tears. I enrolled in ASL classes at the community center. 3 times a week, I sat in a room full of young people and struggled to make my arthritic fingers form the shapes. My teacher, a kind deaf woman named Maria, noticed me practicing during breaks. "Your granddaughter?" she signed slowly so I could understand. I nodded. "She's lucky to have you." I didn't feel lucky. I felt overwhelmed, exhausted, and completely out of my depth. But I kept going. Every night, Emma and I would sit at the kitchen table and practice signs together. I'd point to objects and show her the sign. She'd copy me, and slowly, painfully, we built a bridge between our worlds. The school district wanted to put Emma in a special education classroom with minimal mainstreaming. They said she was low-functioning and would never catch up to her peers. I sat in that IEP meeting with 6 administrators telling me what my granddaughter couldn't do, and something inside me snapped. "Show me the law," I said calmly. "Show me where it says a deaf child can't receive proper accommodations in a regular classroom." They weren't expecting that. They shuffled papers and exchanged nervous glances. "Mr. Patterson, we just think." "I don't care what you think. I care what the law says. IDEA requires the least restrictive environment. Emma is not intellectually disabled. She's deaf. There's a difference. I hired an advocate. I filed complaints. I showed up at every school board meeting. Eventually, they gave Emma an interpreter, a resource teacher, and a seat in a regular first-grade classroom. But the real breakthrough didn't happen at school. It happened at my kitchen table. Emma was 7 years old when she discovered my old art supplies. I'd kept them in the garage after I retired, boxes full of paints, brushes, canvases, and charcoal pencils. She found them one afternoon while I was organizing the shelves. She tugged on my sleeve and pointed at a box of watercolors, her eyes wide with curiosity. "You want to paint?" I signed. She nodded so hard I thought her head might fall off. I set up a small workspace for her on the back porch. Nothing fancy, just a folding table, some cheap paper, and a cup of water for the brushes. I expected the usual childish scribbles, houses with smoke coming out of chimneys, stick figure families, maybe a rainbow or two. What Emma created stopped me in my tracks. She painted a bird, not a childish representation of a bird, but a detailed, nuanced portrait of a robin mid-flight. The colors were slightly wrong, more purple than red, more green than brown, but the form was perfect. The movement was captured in a way that I, a trained artist, would have struggled to achieve. I watched her work for 20 minutes straight. She never looked up, never paused, never seemed aware that I was there at all. When she finally set down her brush, she looked at me with those big hazel eyes, waiting for my reaction. I signed, "Beautiful. You are an artist." She smiled. It was the first real smile I'd seen from her since she arrived at my door. From that day forward, art became our language. When Emma couldn't find the signs to express her emotions, she painted them. When she was frustrated with the hearing world, she drew her fury in bold, angry strokes. When she missed her father, though she never admitted it, she created haunting portraits of faceless men walking away. I didn't push her. I simply provided the materials and the space. Better paints when I could afford them, real canvases instead of paper, books about famous artists, especially deaf artists like Regina Olsen Hughes and Chuck Baird. Emma devoured them all. By the time she was 10, her work was beyond anything I could have taught her. She had developed a unique style that combined hyper-realistic details with surrealist elements. A flower would have every petal rendered perfectly, but it would be growing out of a cloud or blooming inside a keyhole. I entered one of her pieces in a regional youth art competition. She won first place. The judges assumed she was a high school student. When they learned she was a 10-year-old deaf girl, they were speechless. "Has she had formal training?" one judge asked me. "No," I said. "She's self-taught. I just gave her the paints." Word started to spread. Local newspapers did stories. An art teacher from Ohio State came to observe her technique. A gallery owner in Cleveland offered to display her work in a youth showcase. Through all of this, Emma remained Emma, quiet, focused, preferring the company of her canvases to most people. She had a few friends at school who had learned basic sign language to communicate with her, but her true companions were her brushes and her colors. And through all of this, Derek never called. Not once. The years passed. Emma turned 12, then 14, then 16. Her art evolved with her, becoming more complex and emotionally sophisticated. She started incorporating elements of deaf culture into her work, exploring what it meant to experience the world through sight and touch alone. At 15, she created a series called Silent Frequencies that depicted the invisible vibrations that deaf people feel but cannot hear. Music as color waves, thunder as concentric circles of gray, laughter as bursts of yellow light. A gallery in New York saw photos of the series online and reached out. "We'd like to feature Emma's work in our Emerging Artists exhibition," the curator said during our video call. "We think she has extraordinary potential." I looked at Emma, who was watching the interpreter translate the call. "What do you think?" I signed to her. Can you come with me? She signed back. Of course. We flew to New York City in March of her sophomore year. Emma had never been on an airplane before. She pressed her face against the window during takeoff, watching the ground fall away with an expression of pure wonder. The exhibition was a success. Critics praised her work. Collectors inquired about prices. A wealthy couple from Connecticut purchased her largest piece for $15,000. Emma couldn't believe it. That's more than a car, she signed to me in the hotel room afterward, her hands moving so fast I could barely follow. People paid real money for something I made. That's what happens when you're talented, I signed back. You've earned this. But the true turning point came 2 years later, just after Emma's 18th birthday. She had been working on a new series, her most ambitious yet. It was called The Weight of Silence, and it explored the emotional landscape of growing up deaf in a hearing world. Each painting was larger than the last, some stretching 8 feet across. The centerpiece was a self-portrait of Emma standing in a sea of mouths, all moving, all speaking, while she remained still and alone in the center. A prominent art collector named Victoria Chen saw photos of the unfinished series on Instagram. Victoria was known for championing unconventional artists, and she had a reputation for paying top dollar for work that moved her. She flew to Columbus to meet Emma in person. I watched from across my living room as the two of them communicated through an interpreter. Victoria asking questions about Emma's process, her inspirations, her vision. I want to buy the entire series, Victoria said finally. Before it's even finished, I'll commission the remaining pieces and acquire the completed ones. What's your offer? The interpreter asked on Emma's behalf. Victoria named a figure that made my heart stop. $2.3 million. Emma looked at me, her face pale. I was probably just as pale. Emma's hands trembled as she signed. That's not possible. It's not only possible, Victoria said through the interpreter. It's fair. Your work is exceptional. The art world is going to know your name, Emma. I just want to be the first one to recognize it. They negotiated for an hour. By the end, the final agreement was for $2.1 million, with Emma retaining partial rights to reproductions. Victoria also offered to fund a studio space in New York and cover Emma's living expenses while she completed the series. Emma looked at me again. You should take it, I signed. This is your dream. But what about you? She signed back. I don't want to leave you alone. My eyes filled with tears. This girl, this incredible young woman, had spent her entire childhood being left behind by everyone who was supposed to love her. And now, faced with the opportunity of a lifetime, her first thought was about me. I'll be fine, I signed. You've already given me more than I ever deserved. Emma accepted the offer. We celebrated that night with pizza and ice cream, just like we used to when she was little. She fell asleep on the couch, and I sat in my armchair watching her, feeling prouder than I'd ever felt in my life. And then, 3 weeks later came the doorbell. 3 rings, quick succession, demanding. I opened the door, and there stood my son Derek. He was 43 now, heavier than I remembered, with gray at his temples and expensive shoes on his feet. Beside him was a blonde woman I'd never met, and behind them both was a man in a suit carrying a briefcase. A lawyer. Hey, Dad, Derek said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Long time no see. I didn't invite them in. What do you want, Derek? Can't a son visit his father? You haven't visited in 12 years. Try again. The smile faltered. Fine. I heard about Emma's deal. Big news travels fast. I'm here to talk about our family's future. Our family? I felt my blood pressure rising. You don't have a family. You abandoned your daughter when she was 5 years old. I never terminated my parental rights, Derek said, his voice hardening. Legally, I'm still her father. And as her father, I have a responsibility to ensure her finances are being managed properly. The lawyer stepped forward. Mr. Patterson, my name is Richard Crane. I represent your son in this matter. We have some concerns about the arrangement between Emma and this collector. Given Emma's disabilities, she's not disabled, I interrupted. She's deaf. Capital D. It's a culture, not a handicap. Regardless, the lawyer continued smoothly. She's 18 years old and has never managed significant sums of money. Derek is concerned that she may be taken advantage of. We're prepared to file for a conservatorship to protect her interests. I stared at them. At Derek, who had thrown away his daughter like garbage and was now trying to control her money. At his wife, who hadn't said a word but was eyeing my house like she was calculating its value. At the lawyer, who probably charged more per hour than I'd made in a week as a teacher. "Get off my property," I said quietly. "Dad, be reasonable." I said, "Get off my property." Derek's face twisted with anger. "You can't keep her from me forever. I'm her father. I have rights. You gave up your rights the day you walked out that door." I pointed to the exact spot where he'd abandoned Emma 12 years ago. "She waited for you, Derek. Every single day for the first year, she would sit by the window and watch for your car. Do you have any idea what that did to her? I was young. I made mistakes. A mistake is forgetting someone's birthday. Abandoning your deaf daughter is a choice." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Mr. Patterson, we're trying to resolve this amicably. If we have to go through the courts, then go through the courts." I stepped back inside. "Emma is an adult now. She makes her own decisions. And when she finds out what you're trying to do, I guarantee she won't give you a single cent." I slammed the door in their faces. That night, I sat Emma down and told her everything. I showed her the business card the lawyer had left behind. I explained what a conservatorship was and what Derek was trying to do. Emma's face went through a dozen emotions. Confusion, hurt, anger, betrayal. "He never wanted me," she signed, her movements sharp and bitter. "He just wants my money." "I'm so sorry, sweetheart." "Don't be sorry. You're not the one who left." She stared at the business card for a long moment. Then she looked up at me with fire in her eyes. "He wants to go to court? Fine. Let's go to court." The hearing was scheduled for 6 weeks later. Derek's lawyer filed a petition claiming that Emma, due to her deafness, was vulnerable to financial exploitation and required oversight. He presented evidence that I had influenced her career for my own financial benefit. Emma hired her own lawyer, a fierce woman named Patricia Reeves, who specialized in disability rights. Patricia was thrilled to take the case. "This is exactly the kind of paternalistic garbage that my career was built to fight," she told Emma during their first meeting. "Being deaf doesn't make you incompetent. It makes you different. There's a world of difference." We prepared for months. Emma gathered every report card, every award, every review of her artwork. Victoria Chen flew in to testify about Emma's business acumen during their negotiations. Emma's teachers submitted letters describing her intelligence, her work ethic, her independence. And then came the day of the hearing. The courtroom was cold and formal, all wood paneling and stern portraits of judges. Derek sat on one side with his lawyer and his silent wife. Emma and I sat on the other, with Patricia between us and an ASL interpreter at Emma's side. Derek's lawyer made his case first. He painted a picture of a vulnerable young woman who couldn't possibly manage millions of dollars on her own. He questioned my motives, suggested that I had isolated Emma from her father, implied that I was the one exploiting her. I gripped the armrest of my chair so hard my knuckles turned white, but Patricia had told me to stay calm. "Let them hang themselves," she'd said. "The truth is on our side." Then it was Emma's turn. She walked to the witness stand with her head held high. The interpreter stood beside her, ready to translate her signs. Derek's lawyer approached. "Miss Patterson, do you understand the nature of these proceedings?" "Yes," Emma signed. And the interpreter spoke her words. "My biological father, who abandoned me when I was 5 years old, wants to control my money because he thinks being deaf makes me stupid." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Derek shifted uncomfortably. "I'll rephrase," the lawyer said, flustered. "Do you believe you're capable of managing $2 million? Do you believe you're capable of asking respectful questions?" Emma signed back. The judge actually smiled at that. The lawyer tried another approach. "Your grandfather has been your primary influence for 12 years. Isn't it true that he guided your artistic career?" Emma considered the question. "My grandfather gave me paintbrushes and a quiet place to work. He drove me to art shows and believed in me when no one else did. He didn't guide my career. He supported my journey. There's a difference. But surely his background as an art teacher. My grandfather taught high school students how to hold a pencil and use perspective. I taught myself to see the world in color and silence. No offense to Grandpa." She glanced at me with a small smile. "His influence was love. Everything else was mine." I wiped my eyes. Patricia squeezed my arm. The lawyer made a few more attempts, but Emma deflected each one with grace and intelligence. Finally, he returned to his seat, defeated. Then Patricia stood. "Emma, could you tell the court about your relationship with your father?" Emma was quiet for a long moment. When she finally began to sign, her movements were slow and deliberate. "I used to think my father abandoned me because something was wrong with me, because I was broken, because I couldn't hear the words he wanted to say. I spent years believing that I wasn't worth staying for." The courtroom was completely silent. Even the stenographer had stopped typing. Then I realized that the problem was never with me. It was with him. He couldn't handle having a child who was different. He wanted easy, and I was hard. So he left. She turned to look directly at Derek. He couldn't meet her eyes. "I haven't seen you in 12 years. You never called. You never wrote. You never sent a birthday card or a Christmas present. You never asked how I was doing in school or whether I had friends or if I was happy. And now you're here, in a courtroom, trying to convince a judge that you care about my well-being?" She shook her head slowly. "You don't care about me. You care about $2 million. And the answer is no. Not a penny. Not ever." She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I am an adult. I am capable of making my own decisions. I have built a career through my own talent and hard work. The only person who has ever truly supported me is my grandfather, and the only person who has ever truly abandoned me is sitting in this courtroom with a lawyer." She took a breath. "Please don't let him take anything else from me." The judge called a brief recess. When he returned, his decision was swift. "Petition denied," he said. "Miss Patterson has demonstrated clear capacity to manage her own affairs. There is no evidence of exploitation by Mr. Walter Patterson and substantial evidence that he has provided appropriate support for his granddaughter's development. The court finds no basis for conservatorship." He turned to Derek. "Mr. Patterson, I suggest you reflect carefully on your priorities. This court exists to protect the vulnerable, not to enable opportunism. You are dismissed." Derek's face was red with fury. His wife was already heading for the door. The lawyer was packing his briefcase with the air of a man who knew he'd lost badly. But Derek stopped at our table on his way out. "This isn't over," he hissed at me. "She's still my daughter." Emma stood up. She was the same height as her father now, and she looked him dead in the eyes. "No," she signed, and she spoke the word aloud at the same time, her voice rough from disuse but perfectly clear. "No." Derek flinched like she'd struck him. "I am not your daughter," Emma continued, signing and speaking. "I am my grandfather's granddaughter. He is my family. You are a stranger." She took my hand. "Let's go home, Grandpa." We walked out of that courthouse together, and we never looked back. That was 6 months ago. Emma finished her series for Victoria Chen and received her payment. She donated a portion to the Ohio School for the Deaf and used another portion to set up a scholarship for deaf artists. The rest went into investments that she manages herself, with guidance from a financial advisor she chose independently. She kept her studio in New York, but comes home to Columbus once a month. We have dinner together, just the two of us, and we talk about everything and nothing. Sometimes we don't talk at all. We just sit on the back porch where she created her first painting, watching the sunset in comfortable silence. Derek tried to contest the court decision, but his appeals went nowhere. Eventually, he gave up. I heard through the grapevine that his wife left him not long after, taking a good portion of his savings with her. I can't say I was sorry. Last week, Emma called me on video chat, her hands moving excitedly. "Grandpa, I got invited to display at the Venice Biennale. It's one of the biggest art exhibitions in the world." "That's incredible, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you." She paused, her expression softening. "Will you come with me? To Venice?" "Emma, that's your moment. You don't need your old grandpa tagging along. You're wrong." She leaned closer to the camera. "Every moment I've had is because of you. I want you there. So next spring, at 68 years old, I'm going to Venice. I've never been to Europe. I've never been anywhere, really, except the corner of Ohio where I spent my entire life. But I'm going to watch my granddaughter take her place among the greatest artists in the world. And I'm going to remember the day she arrived at my door, a silent little girl with tangled hair and haunted eyes. And I'm going to thank God that I said yes. Because that's what family does. We don't walk away when things get hard. We stay, we learn, we grow together. We fight for each other when no one else will. Derek thought being a parent meant providing money and resources. He was wrong. Being a parent means showing up day after day, even when you're tired, even when you're scared, even when you have no idea what you're doing. I showed up for Emma, and she showed up for me. She gave my retirement purpose. She filled my house with color and meaning. She taught me that love doesn't require words or sounds or any language at all. It just requires presence. I used to wonder why God gave me such a difficult path in my final years. A deaf granddaughter I didn't know how to help. A son who disappointed me at every turn. Financial struggles, health scares, and endless paperwork. Now I understand. God didn't give me a burden. He gave me a gift. He gave me Emma, and if I had to do it all over again, every sleepless night, every frustrating IEP meeting, every tear and tantrum and triumph, I would do it in a heartbeat. Because this true story taught me something that took 67 years to learn. Love isn't measured in grand gestures or genetic connections. It's measured in the daily choice to stay when everyone else leaves. It's measured in the patience to learn a new language for someone who cannot hear. It's measured in the faith to see potential where others see only limitations. Emma is my granddaughter, my student, my masterpiece, not because I created her art, but because I gave her the space to create herself. And that, more than any $2 million, is the greatest gift I've ever received. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've made it this far, I hope it reminded you that every child, regardless of ability, deserves someone who believes in them. Maybe that person is you. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, please share it with them, because the world needs more people who choose to stay. God bless you all.